So our next speaker, sorry, we have a bit change of program, is Katrien Verbeke. She is a social entrepreneur and founder of Lettuce. Lettuce is specialized in building more sustainable food system. Katrien has over 16 years of experience in sustainable food. She has been in charge of sustainability at Deleuze, Belgium, and then developed the food policy of the city of Ghent. This urban food policy was the first of its kind in Belgium and was highly recognized in Belgium and abroad. The project has even received the Global Climate Action Award of the United Nations for its leading role. She does combine perspectives both from the profit and the non-profit sector and specializes in co-creating new solutions. So over the past year, cities have taken the lead in shifting our food systems to sustainable, healthy urban food system, and lots of pioneering work has been achieved. And in her talk, Katrien will explore some of the impact generated by cities, but also highlight the challenges ahead of us. Is inclusiveness the most challenging goal? Let us find out.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I'm very happy to be here. So I have founded my own company, Lettuce, which is really about looking for what new innovative solutions we need to shift our food system to a more sustainable one. Where Mats mentioned different actors and who has which role to play, and I think we all have a role to play. And one of the things I try to do is also really connecting the actors in the system, working with cities, governments, but also working with businesses, non-profit, working with citizens. Because we all need to use our impact to shift the food system. I do that by supporting them, but also by setting up initiatives myself, pioneering, trying to find new solutions, new answers to the challenges ahead of us. Today I will talk to you a bit through how cities play a role in shifting the food system, what's happening at the urban level. But I will also look in the second part of my presentation at inclusiveness. I think if we look at challenges ahead of us, this is really, according to me, one of the big ones. So I'll go through that. But first things first, I think today, and I'm not going to take long for this slide because it's been mentioned here and there, but it confirms the movement that we are bringing together the two perspectives of sustainability and health, where they were tackled more separately in the past. You see that the discourses are becoming one discourse. And I've put here the graph on the left of the Eat Lancet report, on the right, the Flemish food triangle, which was updated 1 or 2 weeks ago. And both actually do the same thing. They show what the diet should look like that is healthy, both for the people as well as for the planet. And integrating this also in scientific-based figures and data, I think, is very key in also helping other actors like cities in taking these guidelines and taking them up in their own nutritional guidelines for example, school meals, because this is being looked at. So it's good to have some overarching policy guidelines on how to do this, because this helps actors to put it into practice in what they do on a daily basis. And what this also shows, I think, is, and Stefan also mentioned it in the introduction, I think the need for integrated thinking. This is bringing together expertises from different domains into one discourse. And if we want to impact the food system, we have to look at different domains and expertises behind it. So the food system thinking is what is very important, if you ask me. And taking this then to the city level is a very logical step, actually, because at a city level or a governmental level, you are in a right role to take up the systemic point of view. You are not one of the actors which has its own stake at hand to defend. You can take the systemic perspective. So cities have understood this. And whereas food was hardly on the agenda of cities and authority and governments 10 years ago, it's really been taking up a place in the debate at the city level. And you cities worldwide taking a leading role in this discourse. You see it. I worked for the city of Ghent and started the first Belgian food policy in 2013, but by now you have Brussels, you have Leuven, you have Antwerp who's looking into it, you have the Flemish government that is now working on its food policy. But if you look around the world, and I'll go through some of these examples later on, you have here a picture of Quito in Ecuador and one of Toronto in Canada, you have Beijing working on this, etc. So cities around the world are taking the lead and looking what role they can play to impact the food system and shift it. And I've put here also the cover of the Weekend Knack edition of 2 weeks ago, where it was a special edition also on how cities work on the food system. So you see something is happening and it's going faster and faster. But so what is this about at the city level and what is happening? So you see the systemic view, and as I said, I think that's one of the advantages of the role a city can take also in this debate. And you see, for me, 3 big building blocks. I could limit them down to more specific ones, but one is how is our food being produced, and how do we bring it to the consumer? So what is the logistics? What is the system behind it? Do we have space for food production outside the city, within the city? The second one, I'll go back to a previous slide. The second one is about consumption patterns, about eating well. So it's about our diets, and it's been already mentioned a lot this morning, but also about educating. How do we make sure that everybody knows what a healthy diet is, a sustainable diet, and how do we ensure, and that's what my second part also will be about, that it's inclusive, that it is something that is accessible for everyone and not just higher educated people, middle class people, or whoever has the right budget to spend on it. And the last building block is on circularity, is on zero waste. Today, 1/3 of our food worldwide is being wasted. And that is huge, but it's the reality. And having a more sustainable food system is also really about being more efficient in what we waste today, whether it's at the farm or in our households, what we throw away. There's a lot of work to be done there. To make it more concrete, I'll give some examples of what the impact can be of initiatives taken up by cities. So I'll give some examples. I'll start at the top right hand. So you have several cities that have launched distribution systems for local food. So to make it easier to bring food that is being produced in the region into the city where you have lots of consumers. You have Vanille, which is a platform in Ghent. You have Kortom, which is a platform in Leuven. And you see other cities also really looking into the potential of hubs, of logistics, of facilitating this connection between the farmers and the buyers in the city, whether it's big buyers, restaurants, shops, or the individual buyers. Second one is on land, making land available, and land has already also been touched upon. Cities also own land. It's not just about the land they own or the parks they have that could be used for urban agriculture. It's also about regulating how space is being used in and around the city, but also making city land available for sustainable food production. Vegetable gardens, it's more the urban agriculture side. It has a big educational value. It's bringing food production very close to the people, to the children in schools, in neighborhoods, and it has a lot of potential. And if we look at the figures, I see in cities that the number of school gardens, for example, has tripled over the past 5 years. So it's really a booming market. And then as a city, you can take care of providing expertise in how to do it, provide some materials to make it happen, provide educational support. So to give some figures for Ghent, for example, in 5 years' time, we had started 40 new vegetable gardens in schools, 30 vegetable gardens in different neighborhoods, just by providing support, providing expertise to help people, because the dynamics are there, people want to do it, but you can push them to make it work successfully. When we look more at the consumption pattern, the more plant-based diets, I think, is one of the big challenges, and we've seen figures on the planet impact of eating meat. In Ghent, we have had the Thursday Veggie campaign that's been running for 12 years now, and where you see that, and I think that's a very interesting one, that you see that as a government, you can have impact on the very personal eating behavior of people. So by just promoting a vegetarian campaign and saying, let's just try also as a citizen to choose for a meatless day at least once a week, we have really seen an impact on people's eating behavior, because you have a very neutral role. And again, I come back to what I said before, that as a government, you're not one of the beneficiaries, so to say, of the commercial beneficiaries in the food system. So you have credibility to put this message out there. So we've seen that at a certain point in Ghent, for example, we were at double as much vegetarians as the average in Flanders by having this campaign, which puts dynamics, speeds them up. School meals, I think, an interesting one, and I'll come back to schools later on. But and what you see happening there is in Ghent, we worked a lot on sustainability criteria and how to translate them into the school meals and the nutritional criteria. And as I said before, so for example, there's about 25% organic ingredients now. But what is interesting there is that the Eat Lancet report, for example, provides nutritional guidelines that then can be translated into how cities buy school meals and which nutritional criteria that they require from the caterers that they work with. Then we see initiatives on circularity and on food waste. One of them is a doggy bag, Restaurant, which is a doggy bag launched in Ghent, which is actually, again, something that it's a free doggy bag distributed to restaurants that want to use it. But by campaigning around it, you help people take on the habit of daring to ask to take their leftovers home when they go to a restaurant, and the same for the restaurants to dare to offer it. Because in Belgium, it's not in our habits to do so. It is sometimes abroad, but so we've taken really steps, and in 5 years' time, for example, this has been used 57,000 times in over 170 restaurants in just one small Belgian city. So, and it's been copied by several other cities by now. So you see that these are simple initiatives, but that do help to shift our daily habits in how we use food and how we treat food. And the last one on the top left side, and one of the initiatives that also has been awarded many times, is Food Savers in Ghent, which is a very beautiful initiative, which focuses on bringing fresh food to people in vulnerable situations. And it focuses on surpluses in the system, but not necessarily bad quality leftovers, because we go to the wholesale market, we go to the distribution centers of supermarkets, where there's quantities left that will not be able to be sold in the end, but that are in perfect quality. And so this initiative manages to distribute 2,000 tons of fresh food, and it's 70% is fruit and vegetables, so there's a real focus on healthy food, to 50,000 people every year in vulnerable situations. For a city of 250,000 people, this is huge. So it matches almost the same level as people in poverty in the city get better access to fresh food to the system. So this is also an initiative where we, as a city in Ghent, we invested in a logistics system, providing a centralized solution. And if we calculate the return, every euro that goes into this project delivers 7 euros of food, of fresh food, healthy food being distributed to people in poverty. So this is where you have a leverage effect that you can achieve. So this gives an idea of some of the initiatives I focused here on Ghent, but you see similar initiatives happening in Brussels, for example, with the good food initiatives, where there's a big focus also on agriculture activities, etc. So lots of cities are really looking at how they can play a role in this. And one last element, and what you see in cities happening, is that the policy domain of food, and I think that's also an interesting one, is actually being used to experiment with more participative ways of governance. And it's an area that is new at the city level, also at the governance level. So, and it's being used to go one step further and to really have a governance body as a food council that decides not only on the priorities of the city, but also decides on how the budget is being spent, and also decides on sets new projects, launches them and creates new projects. And so this also, I think, is very interesting to see. And again, inclusivity here is still a challenge to make sure that the stakeholders around the table are the right ones, are the good representation. But this is something lots of cities are working on, to really see food as a topic that is not merely in the hands at the policy level of the governments, but is really a shared responsibility where the governance is happening in a participative way. So very interesting also to see there, how far can we go and how can we push policy making to something that really also can happen bottom up and in collaboration. So this gives an idea of the role that cities play today on sustainable, healthy food. It's just some examples. I could give many more. But looking forward, for me, one of those main challenges is the inclusiveness of sustainable food systems. And I'll show you some of the challenges I see there. I have a quote here. I've put it in Dutch, but I could quickly wrap it up in English. It's a quote of a teacher that observes a young child that brings all bread and damaged fruit to school. And when asking one day why she hasn't brought any fruit, she answers that the grandmother was sick and couldn't go pick up the food that was outside of the supermarket for people's pets. And it's just one of the many stories. I've seen plenty of these stories, but I can also show the figures, but sometimes a story tells more. And it's because it is about people's lives, and it's how they struggle to survive, to feed themselves, but also their children. And for me, it's still shocking that in a rich country like Belgium, we don't manage to feed our people properly today. So whoever would prefer figures, to give an idea, and I'll talk here on school meals, where I see a big challenge. In Antwerp, we have 30 to 35% of children in poverty. And in schools, we have 71% of children that get financial support. 71%, that is huge. In Ghent, I know that in the city schools, 1 out of 4 children cannot pay the school's bills, and the social welfare department intervenes. If you translate this to a classroom of your own children, you have to imagine and say that if you're in a classroom of 20 people, 5 of them are 20 children, 5 of them are not able to pay the school's bills. Schools are one of the places in our society where we reach everyone. Every child, or almost every child, goes to school. So we have a leverage potential there that is underused, and we see an increasing challenge of those empty lunch boxes, which is children that don't have food that they bring to school. They don't have money to pay for it, but also children that bring a lunchbox that is very unnutritional, so where there's no nutritional quality inside. And in Belgium, for me, this is hardly touched upon in political discussions, and there's still a real role to play. If we look at Scandinavia and other countries, also in the US, a lot more is being done with free school lunches. To give one example, and Mats definitely should be able to add many more inspiration on this. In Finland, they introduced free school meals in 1948. And obesity there is 3 times lower amongst children than the current average rate in Europe. And they managed to decrease obesity amongst children in the past years, amongst others by investing in those healthy school meals. So if we want to tackle obesity, why shouldn't we start with those school contexts where we are in charge of what is being served, and every euro we invest there is a euro that goes to food, to children, to our children. And then in times of crisis, if we look at the pandemic today, what you see is that in Belgium, many schools have stopped serving food because of the pandemic. So we have let hygiene matter more than feeding our children, because we have to realize that those school meals today are a way for children to have access to food. And what you see abroad, which is completely not touched upon in Belgium, is that in the US, for example, I've seen, or in Canada, I've seen initiatives where schools closed as well because of the pandemic, but they went to look for alternatives to distribute the school meals. So they went to libraries to reach children and to make sure that the meals that normally were distributed to schools were still being distributed. And this hasn't happened completely here. So this is something I think where there's still a lot of potential to really look at how can we at least have a school context where children shouldn't be hungry, because investing in children that are well fed and healthfully fed leads to better school results, lead to children with better concentration results, leads to better, and so leads to more equality. So if we want to tackle also inequality in our society, starting at the school level is a very key one. So I think there's still a lot to be done there. It's not just about free school meals. It's also about how to integrate this in the educational work that is being done. As I mentioned before, there's also a lot happening on school vegetable gardens to bring this educational part in it. And I mentioned here also the solidarity mechanism. I'm also working on a pilot project to, as long as the government won't finance the school meals in Belgium, how can we use more solidarity within our society to finance the meals for the children that need to have access today? I don't have time now to go into detail, but I think there's still one of the priorities that we should be tackling. Another one that links to, and also links to schools often, is about the food environments. And if we talk about the role of government, I think we can still really play a role here, which we don't do today. This is about the availability of fresh food. And terms such as food deserts, food swamps are being used. Food deserts to show the lack of access to fresh food, food swamps to the access to too much unnutritional food, an overload of unhealthy food. And for example, this map of the US where the food environments are much more on the agenda shows that you have 2.3 million Americans that live more than a mile away from a supermarket and they don't own a car. So it's about how easy is it for you to have access to buy food, to buy fresh food. And taking it back, for example, to the school environment, it's what if your 16-year-old goes out of school during lunch break and the school is surrounded by fast food chains? So what do you expect him or her to eat during lunchtime but unhealthy food? So this is something we should also look at, because there are different ways how we can impact this as government, through spatial planning, through economic permits, marketing legislation, and we can influence these food environments that we only do very little today. And we are currently working on doing a first mapping for Flanders, and we focus, this is a map of Ghent, if you can see it well, and I have a next one on Sint-Truiden. So we're looking at 2 cities and mapping where you can buy fresh food or eat fresh, healthy food and unhealthy foods. So we map, and you see then areas coming up. And again, I can't go into details here, but what you also see on this map is there are areas in these cities that we can call food deserts, which mean that they're neighborhoods where you don't have any fresh food available within 1 kilometer in a city environment. So even almost in the city centers, you see real concentration of food and where it's accessible. We link here spatial information with socio-demographic data also. We link it with walkability scores, how easily can you walk to these outlets, and we will make policy recommendations based on this in how we, also at city level, but also at the regional level and the Flemish level, could influence this and could improve the food environment so that people have better access to sustainable and healthy food in their environment. So this is a map of Ghent. It's just giving a preview because the research is currently ongoing, and we're also going on site talking to different people on how they experience their environments. This is a map of Sint-Truiden, so it's 2 cities we're looking at into detail in this research. But again, if you look abroad, there are lots of examples on how cities also do intervene on this. You have Amsterdam, which invests a lot on this and has, for example, forbidden advertisements on unhealthy food in the underground. You have the supermarket initiative on the right, which is a low-cost organic pop-up store that goes into these areas that are food deserts in Los Angeles. And there are lots of different initiatives in how you can play with this. But if you let the market they go for the neighborhoods where there's a lot of economic potential and where there's a better income. And the most vulnerable people and those neighborhoods are being underserved with the solutions that they need. And so this is, again, where there's a need for more inclusive solutions. And how do we have a food system that also reaches these people in our society? Okay, one last element on inclusivity is access to income. If we talk about sustainable food initiatives and urban agriculture, for example, and also access to food, it's about more than just food provisioning and bringing food to people and food donations, for example, because the real answer to poverty is generating income for people. And there's still a lot of potential again there. On the left-hand side is a picture of an initiative in Toronto that uses food as a tool for people that are newcomers in the city. And they can, without any cost, have a training that helps them find a job or set up their own business in the food sector or start their own restaurants. So they make sure as a city that people can get the right certificates, the right training to get started, and thus generate their own income. On the right-hand side is a very big initiative of Quito in Ecuador, where they've invested in very big areas of urban agriculture, but not just for people being able to have their own garden and their food production. They link it to lots of markets in the city that allow those people also to sell whatever they've produced and don't need for themselves. And this has proven to be very important for generating income for those families that often come from a very vulnerable background. So these are some of the, I think, domains where there is still a real potential to bring in more inclusive or bring about more inclusive solutions to our food system. So that is a bit my final slide. I think a lot is happening, but there are still real challenges ahead of us. And for me, inclusiveness is one of these challenges. So let us work on this. Let us invest in sustainable, healthy food, but also create this more equal society and start with our children and the school context. So a warm welcome to let us co-create together and join forces from an integrated perspective to co-create the future. Thank you very much.